Welcome to turn 5 of my solitaire playthrough of Labyrinth. I want to make a quick correction as usual, and all of this is noted in the description boxes below the videos. When we played Schengen Visa's last turn and a cell traveled from the Philippines to Germany, that should actually have gone to a different country because Germany was already marked and tested as a result of the Schrock and Schroeder card. So I rolled and rolled again on the Schengen random chart table thing and got Spain as the result. So Spain is now at soft and is the recipient of this sleeper cell. We still have probably another turn or two left in the draw pile, but if you wanted to just get a gauge how you're doing, of course it's a little early for the campaign game, but by the end of deck 1, if you're playing the standard game, you want to make sure your good resources is at 6, so we're doing pretty well there. I also got a request to show the US hand at the beginning of each turn, and I think that is a great idea. As long as you're up for it, I would be happy to do so, because it's such a big part of the whole gameplay experience when you first get your new hand of cards and each player takes some time to look at them and just to figure out what order they want to play their cards in, or kind of come up with some sort of plan and some sort of backup plan on how to react to opponents' cards and events. So we have 3 jihadist associated events with low ops values of 1, 3 US associated events, and 3 unassociated events. Taking a look at just these 3 first. This one, when played, would trigger the event, place a cell in Somalia. Somalia is right now a good ally. There's weird glare. Can't get rid of there. With a cadre recruit marker. This is not terrible enough to worry too much about it, but it's not good. The next 2 cards are a little better, and that's because the preconditions are not being met on the board. So the first one is IED. Play if a cell is in a regime change country, US randomly discards a card. If we had a cell in a regime change country, I might save this towards the end and make it so that the card discarded is just a bad one. But at the moment there are no regime change countries. There aren't even any Islamist rule countries. So that's looking like a good candidate for early card play. As well as this one. Play if a regime change country has a cell. -1 prestige blocks UN nation building. Now looking at the US associated events, we have Predator again. There's several of these. Drones deny extremist sanctuary, remove a cell from Muslim country. We've seen that in action before. That's a pretty good one to play for the event. And we have Quartet. Play if was in effect troops not in Overstretch and no Islamist rule adjacent to Israel. Now, looking back, if you don't remember, we have some lingering events. We have 3 of them. One of them is Abbas, and that basically allows Quartet. It had something really great when you play it, but then it also allows this kind of piggyback of similar benefits to the United States. So we have our marker there in the event box, and what Quartet does is it raises prestige by 2 and lowers jihadist funding by 3. That's really great for a number of reasons. Looking at the jihadist funding track, they're at 5 or moderate funding, and if they drop by 3 they would be in the tight funding zone. And that not only decreases the number of cards you can draw at the beginning of your turn, but it also decreases the number of cells that you can recruit. So the marker is currently in the moderate box of the funding track, so they would be able to recruit any cells in the tight zone of the track as well as the moderate zone, but have no access to these 5 cells in the ample area of the track. So if this should be dropped down to tight, they would no longer have access to any of those cells. So that's looking like a very, very strong opening to prevent more cells from reaching the board. But whenever when the US player disrupts and removes cells, or whenever cells are removed from the board, let's say as a result of Predator, those cells are returned to the funding track. The next card we have is Benazir Bhutto. Pakistani movement fights both extremism and military rule. Play if no Islamist rule within one country of Pakistan. By the way, looking back at Quartet, that says also troops not in overstretch and no Islamist rule adjacent to Israel, and there's no Islamist rule or even regime changes on the board at the moment. And currently on the troop track, we're at low intensity. So this play, if no Islamist rule within one country of Pakistan, would also, that precondition is also met, and would be a good opportunity to activate this event, which would then be played once and removed from the game. Looking at Pakistan, they have FATA, which means that we would not be able to disrupt there unless that country has a regime change marker. Within one country of Pakistan, which I'm assuming means adjacent to it. This card would prevent any jihads from being conducted there. And if it's at poor, which it is, that would be shifted to fair. And then it blocks the event Musharraf and is blocked by the event Bhutto shot. Because we would not be able to conduct any disrupt operations there until Fatah is blocked by Pakistani offensive, this would be a good way to make sure that it doesn't fall under Islamist rule. So we definitely want to take advantage of that. So some good cards in here. And then we have a few of these unassociated events. Darfur, Khartoum pressured over atrocities. Test Sudan. If US prestige high or very high, place 1 aid in Sudan and shift 1 box toward ally. If not, place besieged regime and shift toward adversary. Our US prestige is currently at medium, so I would not want to play this yet, but if you remember, if we can remember to play it after Quartet, which would raise prestige by 2, that would bring us into the high zone, and then we can follow that up with Darfur and test Sudan, which is here, which is an oil exporter, and it's also adjacent to a good ally, so that would be that much easier to conduct a war of ideas in Sudan on future turns. So that is looking like a pretty good sequence of card play. Next we have oil price spike, windfall for Muslim world. This would increase all the oil exporters' resource values by 1, which doesn't really do anything for us because the victory condition that's automatically triggered is based on Islamist resources. But what it does allow us to do is to dig through the discard pile or through these lapsing events or first plot cards and grab something and take it back into our hand. So that's, and the price spike would only last 1 turn. So that's a great use for that card. 3 ops is also pretty nice. And then finally we have US election, and this is a special card. No matter what you do with the card, whether you play it for operations or if it's discarded as a result of an event or at the end of the turn or whatever, the event is automatically triggered. You would roll US posture. That's not prestige, that's posture up here, hard or soft. It's more likely usually that a country would start out soft, but for the US there's a 50-50 chance that it would be one or the other. So there's a 50-50 chance that we'd stay hard. But given that the world posture is soft, it might benefit us to switch to soft. I tend to not want to do that because it prevents us from being able to do something. What is it? A war of ideas? I'm sorry, a regime change. Yeah, it prevents us from being able to conduct a regime change operation. And it also makes it less effective when you disrupt. But seeing that the countries, well, as far as countries in danger of a regime change, I'm looking at Iraq and possibly Central Asia, and possibly Pakistan, and that would be really bad because there's Pakistani arsenal WMDs that would at that point go to the available plots box if Bhutto were to be shot. It's a tough one. My tendency is to not want to do that and try to work at hardening posture of other countries. So we'll think about that. Then, if the penalty is 0, we would gain a prestige. If not, we would lose the prestige. Right now, the penalty is at 2. So we would want to make sure, in order to not lose prestige, that the world posture is in balance. Maybe we should work on that as well, and that would mean conducting a war of ideas in these non-US, non-Muslim countries. Alright, right off the bat, some big surprises here. The first jihadist card is Bhutto shot. So, unfortunately, that will block our Benazir Bhutto card. We'll place, I suppose I'll place this here. We would draw our second jihadist card, and it is this: if troops in overstretch, +2 funding. If troops at low density, -2 funding. So that is a playable non-US event, which means that regardless, the event gets played, which is bad for jihadist AI, dropping them to tight. And then after this, we would get to do some extra stuff. And what they would be doing is actually traveling. So now we'd flip to the travel section of the flowcharts and determine to where the cell is traveling, and it'll be one cell that's traveling as the card has an optionality of 1, and from where it's traveling. So first, to where? A non-Islamist rule country with a besieged regime marker, a regime change marker, or an aid marker. There are none. Then from, to a poor country where a major jihad would be possible with +2 cells. Iraq is a poor country, but it only has 2 cells. There are no troops, and it would need at least 3 other cells to be able to conduct a major jihad, so this would not count. To a good or fair Muslim country that has a cell adjacent to it. Travel 2 priorities, Pakistan, then highest resource. Well, Pakistan is a poor country, so it would not be in the running, but we do have a few high resource value countries that are good, Muslim countries that are good or fair, and that is Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, and Indonesia. And from where is it traveling? From an Islamist rule country, there are none. From a regime change country, there are none. From an adjacent country. So, a cell could travel from the Philippines or Pakistan to Indonesia. A cell could travel from Pakistan or Iraq to the Gulf states, and a cell could travel from Iraq to Saudi Arabia. So first I'm going to determine the target country. I'm going to use a die roll. I don't know if this is the correct way to do this when we have several options. It does say good or fair, so I'm assuming that good is not a priority over fair, so we're going to roll 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We roll a 1, so its cell will be traveling to Saudi Arabia. In this case it's easy because there's only one country adjacent to it that has a cell. Now if Iraq or Pakistan were a good or fair country, I believe in that case, looking at the travel from priorities, a country that has active cells would be a first priority, which is Italy, which wouldn't count in this case. Not another destination. So if Iraq or Pakistan were already fair or good, even if they only had sleeper cells in the solitaire game, you would just ignore travel and just keep the cell there. Okay, so for the US action phase, I will be playing Quartet for the event, and that allows us to raise our prestige to high, or 8, and lower jihadist funding by 3. They're at 3, which means they can only go down by 2 to 1. But we want to play this better now than later, just because we want to take advantage of the fact that we're going to be at high prestige for who knows how long. And then I'll play Darfur. And this one is the card that allows us to test Sudan. This bumps up fair good countries by 1 to 7. The next jihadist card is this US associated unplayable event, Mossad and Shin Bet, Israeli Security Services. Well, with that, they're going to conduct a minor jihad in either Saudi Arabia or Indonesia, the highest valued resources that are good or fair, in which a minor jihad can be conducted. Odds, evens. We roll odds. It'll be in Saudi Arabia. And we'll roll a die, activate that cell, and they're shooting for a 1 or a 2, and a 2 is rolled. It's a success. The second jihadist card is Taliban. Islamist guerrilla resurgence. Place besieged regime in Afghanistan and place a cell there and in Pakistan. -1 prestige or -3 if either at Islamist Rule. So we'll place a besieged regime marker in Afghanistan. And that limitation to the cells on the jihadist funding track is only applicable when recruiting, but when it's an event-driven cell placement, we can automatically place those cells regardless of our level of funding. So 1 in Afghanistan, 1 in Pakistan. US prestige drops to 7, still high on the prestige track. For the US action phase, we'll be playing these 2 jihadist associated cards, neither of which will be triggered, to conduct a war of ideas in Germany and France to change their posture to hard. First rolling for Germany, we get a 5. That's a success. And for France, a 1. It remains soft. The US-JWT relation switches to 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0. Not looking good for the jihadist first card. They drew this, with which they will plot in the Philippines. So they will roll 3 and hope for a 1 or a 2, and they get 1 success. And they roll a 1, so over here they place a plot marker, and because Abu Sayyaf is in effect, we lose 1 prestige, and we're down to medium. For the second jihadist card, they're playing Musharraf, Pakistani president, walks a fine line, play if Pakistan has any cells, remove 1 cell from Pakistan, back to the funding track, set it to poor ally, and we will also conduct a minor jihad, and the minor jihad will be in Afghanistan. We'll flip that and roll a die, and they're hoping for a 1. They roll a 4, and that is a fail. This cell gets removed to the funding track. No cadres placed. Since world posture is at 0, we're going to take advantage of that and play this US election card for the 3 ops. Electorate relooks GWOT. Roll US posture, and there's a +1 on the posture roll because we're rolling for the US. We roll a 5, it remains hard. Then we gain a prestige, so we're back to high. And with the 3 ops, we are going to go ahead and deploy troops to the Philippines from Afghanistan. And our second card will be this 3 ops card, and we'll use the 3 ops to conduct a war of ideas in Sudan. We get a +1 for the aid, a +1 for being adjacent to a good ally, a -1 for trying to improve governance to good, and a +1 for being high on the prestige track, which gives us a net die roll modifier of +2. We roll a 5 and succeed. Good resources bumps up to 6. Next, the jihadist AI will resolve this 2 ops card, ignoring the event, to conduct a minor jihad in Indonesia and Malaysia. We roll a die, and they're hoping for a 1 or a 2 to succeed. They roll a 5, and that's a fail. This goes back to the funding track. For the jihadist final card, they'll play this Hambali Kijai operative for the event to place an available plot in Indonesia and place a plot. And then they'll also conduct a minor jihad in Saudi Arabia, a poor Muslim country with a cell with the highest resource value. And we're doing this for an alignment shift. They roll a 1, they succeed. And for our final US action phase, we will play Predator for the event to remove a cell from Pakistan. And we won't forget to place a cadre marker in Pakistan. And for our second card, we'll play Oil Price Spike. And I think we'll use it for the ops to disrupt in Saudi Arabia, thus raising our prestige another point to 8. Still high on the prestige track. We'll discard our final card, which was place a cell in Somalia, and that'll end turn 5. So we resolved the terror plots. There's a 3 plot and a 1 plot. Philippines dropped, changed posture from soft to hard. The governance level of Indonesia, Malaysia dropped from fair to poor. Prestige dropped from 8 to 7, and jihadist funding rose from 1 to 3, still in the tight region of the funding track. Now for the cleanup phase, funding will go back down to 2. Prestige will remain where it is. We draw new hands and start a new turn.